So I've just put on the recording, and so I think it's a really great moment because we've got someone, Lee Jensen, who I'm sure you can describe yourself better than I can, Lee, but you have the kind of scientific chemical background that I don't have, and we've just identified, and I'll identify myself more as possibly two people on different sides of a discussion, and the discussion concerns vaccination. And so maybe I'll just describe myself, and then Lee, you can describe yourself in any way you want. So I would describe myself as having looked very seriously into vaccination before my son was born, and that means that we bought books, we paid money for advice from health professionals. We means myself and the mother of my son, and we both of us, the mother and me as the father, would probably, I would say, each of us would be reading about vaccination literally on a weekly basis. And so now it's been 10 years of doing that. And so our son is not vaccinated. And we are very happy that he's not vaccinated, despite the possibility, and we looked at it, that for example, that he would get measles, and that the 1 chance in 10,000 or less that he would die from it. So we as parents are parents who are willing to look into the worst nightmare for most parents, which is that our own child might die. So this is the decision we've come to, and we feel, because it's still a minority position, we feel it's incumbent upon us to continually get more information and continually be open for discussion with anybody. Like in this case, I see it as a wonderful opportunity to hear how Lee, in this case, sees it. So that's a description. Would you be able to go for it, for the description?
Yeah, yeah, you'd cut out a little bit, so I didn't hear all of it, but okay. I got the general gist of what you were saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, so yeah, this vaccine thing. So you and I were talking, the start of the need to turn the recorder on was that I just got a flu shot, and this woman friend completely flipped out that I would dare, get a flu shot. And I've never had one before. I haven't had the flu in years, but I was just at the store and at the pharmacy, and they were offering free flu shots, or at least with my insurance, they were free. So I got one, and I had a sore arm, but we got in a huge fight about it. I basically left the house. I just was like, I'm just not gonna, I don't want to tolerate this any longer. Okay, so as far as my qualifications that what you're referring to is, I have a PhD in biophysics from Berkeley, and I did 3 years postdoc at Stanford and 2 years at UCSF, and so I've been around the research community a lot, and I was working in molecular biology and biochemistry. So what I was saying was that when I think of vaccine, I think of, I have not invested the government, what I would call conspiracy theories, whether they're true or not. I'm not discounting them, but I haven't investigated them as far as vaccines. When I think of a vaccine, I think of, a recombinant peptide that matches, a section of the coat protein of a virus, say, or something, and so you inject that, and you get an immune response, and that protects you from that virus. So I look very trustingly, and as I was taught as a molecular biologist, I'm not aware of, I know that some of them have mercury in them. I've heard. I haven't really investigated that. I think those are live viruses. vaccine.
Timerosol, if I remember the name correctly, is
Okay.
the mercury form. Some argue that the mercury form is entirely inert, and others argue that it's definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the amalgamation in your fillings, your dental fillings. People argue that that is mercury, but it doesn't matter, and because it's amalgamated.
And there are many to do with dental fillings who literally um, spend the time and the money to get all of their amalgam
Yeah.
fillings removed. And certainly, I would say my own dentist is certainly of the opinion,
Yeah.
is horrified by mercury fillings.
Right. So I mean, I'm getting. I think I've got all mine removed as well. I'm not sure if there's any left or not.
Mm-hmm.
But they're certainly being rotated out of there.
Yes.
I don't know if they use amalgamated fillings anymore. But anyway, so there's that where it's just the old technology. I mean, mercury's not good for you. If this Timerosol, I don't. I like I said, I haven't really studied it. I just sort of hear this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm basically trusting the pharmaceutical companies, which is probably bad because I think the fear the risk there is that they're profit motivated, but they're also they're presumably watched pretty carefully. If they make a mistake, it can cost them billions. So they're not. I think they're pretty darn careful about things. And my experience as a molecular biologist and knowing people in the pharmaceutical industry um, is that they're very, very careful and that they're held to a very, very high standard. But what you're talking about, like the other thing that was mentioned was this 5G.
Yes.
And the 5G now, radio waves interact with the medical particles in vaccines. And I think that starts getting to, conspiracy theory, which I don't have data on one way or the other.
Well, we do know historic. Let's see. There's a few ways to go. One track is vaccination. Another would be 5G. And what I've noticed in this conversation is just before we turned on the recording is that I referred to something, and what I experienced. So I now see three ways to go. One is vaccination. Second is 5G. Third would be the whole idea of conspiracy theory and how I experienced your reaction when I started to share certain information with you. And so there's three possibilities. We can go in
Well,
any
okay,
direction.
let's talk about conspiracy theory, but we can keep it within the realm of 5G and vaccinations in
Yeah.
particular.
Okay.
That's
So what happened in the dynamics of the conversation for those who before we turned on the recording was that the subject of flu vaccination came up, and the reaction of Lee's friend, and then I talked about my own concern about flu vaccine, and your response, Lee, was to refer to conspiracy theory. So at this point,
no.
oh,
I see it,
yes,
it's one of things. It's either like it's good science, which would
yes,
be like common DNA technologies being used to make a legitimate vaccine. Then there's like faulty technology where they might put was it thimerosal in there,
Timerosol. Mm-hmm.
aerosol, and it turns out to not be good. It turns out to be a mistake to put that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the conspiracy theory where the government puts it in there intentionally so they can control populations with 5G. So I think those are really kind of three separate ways of potentially looking at this vaccine issue.
Yes. The point that I found interesting was that what I'd said is that I was concerned about flu vaccine because I've heard my sister got very ill after flu vaccine. I'm not convinced that I feel it's good for the body to be sick and to have these experiences, that it strengthens. I'm speaking very, very generally. But and then I'd spoken about a theory of how these multiple technologies together could achieve a bad result, a bad result for humanity.
Yeah,
So,
but I think the
yes,
critical issue here, in my mind of what we're talking
yes,
about is it intentional or is it unintentional? You know, if there is a bad result, say the flu vaccine does make people sick.
yes.
The important question then, is it a mistake or was it intentional?
Mm,
And that's where I think the
mm.
crux of our issue is, right?
And I think and here I'll refer to Harald Kautz-Weiler, whom I've met. He's a German researcher, and I hope I don't misrepresent him, but he would say you need to look at multiple technologies all together. Looking at one technology alone won't crack what's really going on. That one needs to look at it in a systemic way. That's one point.
Yeah.
Another point would be, and it's something that I only in the last 5 years, and before this I didn't know it my whole life, was realizing that I had an assumption inside myself, which is I'm a good person, I have good intention, I'm a human being. I can't imagine even the most misguided person actually doing something consciously malevolent, consciously highly destructive towards one or a great number of people.
Yeah.
So always this discount. Oh, that must be wrong, because nobody would possibly think about destroying a significant part of the human population. That wouldn't be, because I couldn't think of doing that. So other people can be very misguided, but that I wouldn't do that, right? Of course, two facts go against that. Firstly, we have history, and I'm speaking from Berlin, and that's a real textbook case where highly intelligent people from a highly intelligent, highly developed culture, the German culture at that time, before the Second World War, came together, sat in a room that's less than an hour away from here, and planned the removal, the final solution, as they called it, for the Jewish and for other minorities, this problem. So where they planned and carried out very effectively, as maybe only the Germans can do, they executed their plan of execution. So
Right.
so that's a historical fact. However that happened, that's a historical fact. So
Right.
that's one point. And the second point is that the understanding of how prevalent is psychopathy in human society. And an understanding that the figures I've read is that maybe 4% of, some people say 1%, some people say 4%, but there's a certain portion of the normal population that is psychopathic, and I mean it in the psychological term. It's very easy to test. With a normal person, you put them with you scan the brain, and then with a regular human being, if you present them with a picture of a tortured baby, the normal human brain is shocked and reacts with a huge emotional response that can be seen as very distinctive across the human brain. However, if you're psychopathic, then you see the very same picture. It's quite clear from the brain scan that you know that you're seeing a picture of a tortured baby, but the full emotional response simply doesn't happen, right? So that's a very clear difference between two kinds of so-called human beings. Here's the thing: as you go higher and higher in management, and also the hidden owners behind the management, the prevalence of psychopathy is at least double, if not a lot more. And we have to take into account these are really clever people who know that being a psychopath is not socially acceptable, and they know how to, they're very aware of how to answer in a way to avoid being recognized as psychopathic.
Yeah.
So then, if you do both of those things and you fully let that in, well, how can we be so sure that plans like before the Second World War don't happen again?
No, I agree. That's the concern. And so there is that, in the realms of possibilities, lacking data. We have, the possibilities that say, sticking with our theme of vaccines here, that
Yes.
the vaccines are good. They're created by good people, smart people, to make the world a better place and make
Yes.
it a healthier place.
Yes.
Then there's the possibility that somebody screwed up and somebody, maybe for profit motive, put some Timersol in there, whatever you call it,
Timerosol.
Timersol, and and that created a reaction in some people and made them sick. Well, that was a bad thing that somebody did, but it was a mistake and it
Yes.
needs to be corrected. But then the third possibility is that there's the malevolent nature of people who have a very small number of psychopaths, like you say, or people who are just consumed by, wanting power, that they would inject something along with the vaccine under the guise of a vaccine that actually carries some subversive, power enabling mechanism.
That degrades health, doesn't strengthen health. Looking at it overall, and that indeed might even have the potential to do more than simply compromise health in a long-term way.
Yeah.
And
Well, it may not.
that we're putting forward, one of there are 1,000 or 100,000 conspiracy theories, and one might be right and the other 99,000 might be wrong, or the fact of a conspiracy theory per se, if we examine the word, of course, every detective is a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Every detective conspires, creates theories of who made plans to kill a person, and a conspiracy means more than one. So who was there a group plan to kill somebody? Every detective is a conspiracy theorist. So the term conspiracy theory per se is I hope we all are conspiracy theorists. If not, we're not using our brain to to look around us and see are the motivations of everybody around me. To assume that they're healthy would not be smart.
Yeah. Well. Okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, the point I'm really hinting at is, I feel that the term conspiracy theory is now so overladen and combined with so many assumptions. But when we actually look at the word itself and the whole idea itself, it needs doing what you're doing and what we're having, which is a conversation where we're carefully allowing potentially two positions to exist at the same time. And I really appreciate the way you're just mirroring You
Well,
represented my point of view in a very constructive way, and I hope I continue to do the same for your point of view.
yeah. So I mean, there are three ways to look at it. You know, it's either like good, all good, or good intentions, bad execution, or there's evil in, intentions with bad execution, or evil intentions.
Could be evil intention with best quality execution,
Yeah.
because it has
So
to
I mean, those
it
are
has
the
to be hidden.
possibilities. And
If
I
it is a
think
bad
so.
intention, it has to be hidden.
Okay. But so what started this conversation then is that as a scientist, I mean, and as you just said here a little bit ago too, I assume intentions are good. I know that if I was out there and somebody said, make a vaccine, I would have the intentions to make the best and most helpful vaccine that I could possibly make. So I assume that anyone working in a pharmaceutical company would have those same intentions, and therefore I trust to take the vaccine. Now, I know people make mistakes. And so I have to take that risk that somebody screwed up. I know these are pretty smart people, so I doubt if they screwed up on a big scale. I know it's been tested, and and you can talk about the FDA and the faults with it and everything else. But there's a very, very high standard for these kinds of things. Still, there's risk.
I think I would agree. Yep.
Okay.
I think I would agree, but
Okay.
I think I would agree. But here's the thing. So a quick gut check, and I've done this question probably with 100 people by now, probably more. Just a quick gut check. Do you trust the largest pharmaceutical companies? Yes or no?
Well, it's not a yes or no. It's, I mean, I think, it becomes
I'm
a yes or no.
forcing a yes or no. I'm forcing a yes or no.
Well, I guess yes then, because I did trust them and I had this injected into my body. So I trusted them enough to do that.
But if you think and here I'm asking for like kind of a heart response, when you think of, you did trust that injection to happen, that's quite clear. But if you think of all that the reports you've read, what you've heard, all of these different things, do you fundamentally feel the pharmaceutical industry has got my back, is really interested in me more than the profit that they will make?
No, now you're kind of changing the scenario here. I think
that was the question I've asked other people. That was the question I've asked.
They're doing this for profit, and I think that's the big risk that we take with pharmaceuticals, is that it's very profit driven, and necessarily so. And I think there's all kinds of issues around that. Do drugs have to be so expensive to produce, or is that could be artificial too? So only big pharmaceutical companies can afford to develop a drug, and that kind of gives them a monopoly on it. That's a whole other issue, and then they can charge whatever price they want after they've done it.
Yeah.
But inherent in all of that is there's lots of checks and balances that are presumably going on, and you can argue about, well, is the FDA corrupt? Is the FDA, can it be bought off, or is it part of this conspiracy? I don't know.
Is there a revolving door between the pharmaceutical industry, the profession of doctors, and government? And the answer is yes.
And then maybe it's just I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So, you develop a drug, we're going to test it, and that gives us jobs. And then we're going to, come back at you, and you're going to give us money. And, it becomes just a symbiotic thing where it drives the price of everything up. But there's all kinds of ways to be concerned about all of this. And I think, some of it's the cost of medicine. But when we're talking about conspiracy theory, we're talking about more than just profit motive, more than just, I'm going to get the most profitable drug I can on the market to as many people as I can sell it to. That's just basic capitalism. And that's bad enough in the pharmaceutical industry. But what you're talking about, really, what we've been talking about is, does it go even further than that? Is there an evil, malevolent plan where, some, manipulator behind the scenes is saying, this planet is mine and I want it to be do my bidding, and I want everyone inhabiting it to be under my control. So I'm going to inject everyone with something that allows me to control their behavior with 5G satellites that I'm now launching into space. I mean, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah. So let's go slowly. Let's reel it back in. All of it, I think it's wonderful to explore. I am watching the time, and I have promised my son to be on time today. What I propose is that we return to the question of vaccination, or we could make it even smaller, to do with adult flu vaccination. But I think but perhaps at a future time, we can start to explore what is my relationship to the term conspiracy theory. Is it a helpful phrase or unhelpful? That means, does it allow me to think more openly and flexibly, or does the term itself have kind of a visceral reaction of closing off avenues of exploration? So,
and I'm using the term without any prejudgment, only as a term to describe a general phenomena or general way of thinking about things. I'm not using it in a positive or a negative way.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer when we do it in future that we just put that term aside, because it's so loaded now.
Okay, so what do we use for?
We could say the way you said it was a question for another time, as are there forces that are interested in a very concentrated way to control the free will of human beings, of human beings on the planet?
Okay, but like it or not, that's generally referred to as conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I'm avoiding. I know, but behind that is a whole media phenomenon, which is mostly unexamined, and I feel it doesn't encourage free thought or free discussion. That's the problem I have.
Okay, well, call it pink theory then. I don't care. I'm using it without any prejudgment or anything behind it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Call it the pink theory. Pink theory is that there are psychopaths or people who are controlling the earth, either wanting to or do or are in charge of controlling the earth's population. So that can be the pink theory.
Yes, or we could say the psychopathic theory might be a better description.
Well, we don't know if they're psychopaths. They may be very intelligent, highly evolved people. Maybe we've always been their livestock. This could be eons in the making, and we've always been the livestock of some higher race that we don't know about, say, or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, yeah, and one thing I would say is, with where I am for speaking for myself, is that what I tend to do is as you know, Lee, at a certain point in development, we find ourselves much more able to handle different perspectives all at the same time, different models all at the same time, different theories all at the same time. And what I try to do is collect a very diverse collection of information about what in heck are we in, called existence, and develop models, and then see how they play out over time. Because the different models say, well, if it's this model, then in 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, we will see this outcome. So I try and, you know, collect the theories and hold them all at the same time and see which one is working out to have more predictive power.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what any good scientist would do.
Yeah.
Until you've got the data, you can entertain every possibility, you know,
Yeah.
while you're collecting the data, and then you narrow it down.
Yeah,
So that's how I'm approaching it too. I don't take any one of those. I mean, I think I've starting off like you say. I'm trusting things. So I took I had the injection in a state of trust, trusting the system. Now, maybe that was a mistake. I don't know. I know that this woman I was with completely flipped out, and it just probably ruined our relationship. I mean,
well, it is interesting because, you know, if you told me that and I'd said, "Oh, Lee, you had a flu vaccine. What on earth are you thinking about?"
Yeah.
Well, that shows me that this friend of yours has taken a position
Yeah.
with a lot of
Oh, yeah.
conclusions about it. And, you know, at this point in history, there's a lot of different things that we have to be a lot more open about. And we see, you know, if I post something in any way anti-vaccination, what happens is Facebook doesn't send it around. That's the first one. There's nearly no responses to it. And directly below it is a silencing of the comments, so that people comment, but you don't immediately see the comments. And there's an automated Facebook response to what I've just written.
Yeah.
So this is a long way from what I thought was a free speech space called Facebook, and which is one of the reasons that I'm going to, you know, it has a sell-by date.
Yeah.
There's a date when I'm going to leave, I'm sure.
All right. So just for the record,
Yes.
Mo, so which of those three possibilities that we discussed do you subscribe to? Have you decided? Are you trusting? Are you
So you're talking about vaccination.
Vaccination.
Okay,
So are you
vaccination.
trusting?
So for the record,
Yeah.
for the record, I have not vaccinated my son, and so far he is showing excellent health, but that's anecdotal, I know. That's after 10 years. So far, looking back, both the mother and father, means me and the mother, we're very happy with our decision, and
Okay.
that means 10 years more collection of information. Are we opposed to vaccination per se? No, which means that I'm having this conversation with you, and I'm absolutely ready to hear the argument that makes me go, oh my golly, I'm going to have to get my son vaccinated as soon as possible. So I'm trying to remain open and flexible. What else? Yeah, that's the situation, and I don't trust the pharmaceutical industry and their motivations. The principle of vaccination, I'm very happy with, but how it's currently being used, no, not happy.
Okay, so it's being currently misused in a sense, in your opinion.
Yeah.
So is it being misused out of ignorance or out of malevolence?
There's some degree of ignorance in that the scientist's perception of a human being tends to be very materialist science, and this simply doesn't include the rapidly growing consequences and implications of non-materialist science.
Right.
So it's treating the human body in a materialist way. Well, if the human identifies as with the reality of material and non-material, this isn't being taken into account.
Sure.
That's one point. And also the pharmaceutical industry is very suspicious in the decisions they make for money and not for people. It's very suspicious.
Well, they're probably motivated for sure, and that's the big problem with big pharma.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I
it
think it
seems,
was.
yeah. So, and what you're saying, your position is, I obviously feel comfortable with having an adult and vaccination, and I haven't asked you, but it sounds like you're approving of childhood vaccination per se, or maybe you have limitations. You have
Well, yeah, I'm saying that
reservations.
on a basis of science, I think vaccinations make sense.
Mm.
And I have not heard, although I'm not closing my mind to the possibility that there have been mistakes and or um, evil intent somewhere behind the scene. I think that those possibilities exist. I just haven't seen any data on it. And so I'm kind of just going with the science because that's the part I know. I think
Mm.
vaccines make sense from a scientific
Mm.
standpoint if they're done properly. But
Mm.
now, you mentioned all these other things, but I forget what you called the immaterial or the inert
Non-materialist,
materials.
non-materialist science.
Okay. But whatever it is, I was thinking what that brought up in my mind was the whole idea of like antibiotics. Sort of like
Yes.
we're taking, the scientific approach is to take things, piece it out one piece at a time. So, antibiotics can have a good effect on the body, and then they can also have sort of side effects. So you've got an infection, shoot yourself full of antibiotics, it gets rid of that infection, but in the
Yes.
process, you killed your gut flora.
Exactly.
And so then you have to make a determination, a decision. Well, is it worth killing my gut flora in order to get rid of this infection? So, and then you start working on antibiotics that selectively don't impact your
Yes.
flora. So I think that's just sort of the scientific method, and you have to accept that. Or
And
one needs to just be aware of that.
it's true. And if my son Jonah was bitten by a dog and there was a genuine risk of rabies, I think I'd go for the very painful 5 injection stomach thing against rabies. So I'm not per se against vaccination.
Yeah. So
So
what I did see in the universities that I mentioned, the top U.S. universities, I did see a lot of scientists working on beneficial medicine, and I did not see anyone making medicine, talking about, well, how can we use this to control people, you know.
I
So I'm
think
not saying
you're
that.
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Um, I'm going to make a hard stop today, but I think it's very interesting what's happening because we've found a subject that's clearly controversial, and I'm in the minority position, and I think it's a wonderful exercise to record it if anybody ever wants to hear it, because then to just see how do we go forward when there's diversity of opinion and perspective, and I can see from your background that you're very well trained in doing it in a good way, in a way that I like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right then. Well, I'm very interested in the pink theory too. I just don't have any data to support it, and that gets, you can extend that into the RSA. I think that was the big thing with, the revelations there. It's like all
Yeah.
this data is being collected. Is it being collected for, to protect us? Could it, or is it being collected to abuse it? Or is it not being collected to abuse it, but just sits there with the potential to abuse it? So there's these possibilities that one has to consider.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop right now. Have a chilled day. Sounds like you're set up for a chilled day. Um, or maybe you have to work a lot. But
It's going to be about 37 degrees centigrade here at Harbor Hot Springs. But I'll be naked in the pool.
Great. Sounds. I'm jealous. So fantastically. Let's speak next week.
Okay.
All the best.
Sounds good.
Bye bye.